Hi, I'm Jason Snape. I'm a senior lecturer of graphic design at Georgia State. I've been teaching here for 10 years. I'm also a gamer and a creative person, and I'm always interested in trying to figure out different tools to help students learn complicated things. And I'm intrigued by what helps people learn, both at the college level and wherever else. So I've been intrigued for years about the idea of board games, which is something I enjoy playing, and how going through the decisions that a game kind of restricts you to could help someone learn about a complicated topic or something. So I'm very compelled by this. I don't have a lot of answers for it, but I have a lot of interesting things I thought I could share with you and hope you guys go and can apply them in intriguing ways. These are some of the games I have and have played. This is nothing compared to some friends of mine. I've gotten more interested as a designer and a creative person. I'm interested in the creative process and design thinking. So all of those really have interesting parallels with trying to teach someone a game, or trying to create a game, or trying to learn one, or trying to become good at it. If you guys have only played, some of the games from childhood, Monopoly, Candyland, Scrabble, these tend to have different kind of topics or nuances that I'm excited to kind of share some things with you. What I hope you most walk away with is how there's a wide variety of content and some surprising topics that board games have been made out of that may be applicable to what you're interested in doing with your students or for yourself. I want to talk first about what makes a game functional, like what makes a game actually work. It has a clear purpose or goal, it has some clear rules and logical design of components. So a game that I can't stand, but it is functional, is called Trouble. Trouble is maddening because it has this little popper in the middle that pops a die, and it's maddening because you don't get to start the game unless you roll, I don't know, like a 2 or something. So you might sit there all game and never roll a 2, and that is just no fun. It is a functional game, but it's not a very fun game. Clear rules, what do you do on your turn? What are we trying to accomplish to win, so to speak, and what are the kind of the rules? What do you do each time it's your turn to play? And then what are some things that make games fun? So we have the functional aspects, these things, and then we have some others. So a satisfying experience for all players. We've maybe played games where someone, if you lose, you're out, and now you're watching other people play. I would argue that that's not necessarily satisfying for everybody, maybe the winners, but not everyone else involved. I'm interested in having an enjoyable, engaged, and involved experience for everyone the whole way through the game. Sufficient friction. I'll talk about friction further onward too. Friction is something that is like obstacles or things that help contribute to this thing, the compelling decisions you have to make. If you guys are familiar with Candyland, there are no decisions to be made in Candyland. You pick up a card and you look at the color and you move your piece, and that is it. There's no options whatsoever. And all small kids seem to love that game. I don't know why. That game also takes way longer than it has any business taking, but that's a whole other thing too. So friction, that means what are the obstacles for you accomplishing the goal? And how challenging are they? Are they so challenging there's no point in playing, or they're so easy it's too easy to play? Compelling decision is kind of like, what do you do on your turn? If you guys have played a card game, cards are often, what do I do? Do I play this? Do I wait? Do I draw another card? Those are very interesting decisions to be made, and that creates tension and suspense, and that often makes a good game. And then cohesive design and components. I'm a designer, so I'm also attentive to this, but a good game has a system or a coding of information using color, typography, imagery, graphic elements in meaningful ways. So if you think about a Monopoly board, the sets of properties that you would want to purchase so to make a Monopoly, they all have a color code. It's not rocket science, but it helps you look at the board very quickly and understand some things that are there. So those help make a game fun because you can kind of focus on playing and not always have to go back to the rules, right? If every single property on Monopoly board was individual colors, and then you had to check kind of a list and refer to that to say, well, does Baltic and I don't know, New York Avenue, do they make a Monopoly? So trying to make coding that very quickly and very visually you can see, help you know the rules or remember what you're supposed to do at any one point. So I came up with kind of this aspects of what are some basic types of games, and I mean very basic, so the ones we kind of been talking about already. So there's direct conflict or elimination: chess, checkers, Risk, Go, Stratego. You're trying to kind of wipe out or defeat the other player. It's very kind of in your face. I'm going to take your pieces away from you. A lot of these have been around a long time. Checkers, chess, and Go, those are all been around an extremely long time. Risk and Stratego are kind of variations of, I don't know. Stratego is probably a variation of chess. Risk, I'm not sure what that is. It uses a map instead of this gridded board. There's management or puzzle type games. Monopoly, Dominoes, Mahjong, Scrabble, Connect 4. you're trying to kind of make something happen, and you have your components in front of you, and you're trying to figure out, how do I have these work together to help me achieve my goal? And then there's some race games, Sorry, Backgammon, Candyland, Cribbage. And some of these combine, right? Cribbage is a combination of managing cards and kind of trying to beat the other person with points. So those are 3 categories to think of. So here's some examples of basic games. So what's interesting about these is that look at how abstract they are, right? Risk is kind of an anomaly because it just came out in the 70s or 60s or something, right? The rest of these may have been around a very long time. Look how there's no theme really, right? You could make these chess pieces different pictures, but there's not really a theme to anything. You're moving, and all the pieces have rules to how they move. So here's what I kind of have as a subcategory to this, right? Abstract, okay? I would argue that, Risk isn't necessarily abstract, but there's armies and things in Risk that are abstracted by just these pieces. Public information. That means you can see everything that's happening. There's nothing hidden. And that's very interesting because often in public information in a game makes it less interesting. There's less suspense. But all the planning is, done in someone's head. There's no hidden kind of cards or things that you don't see. And so there's kind of high level planning for a lot of these. I've never played Go. I'm very compelled by it. There's a really great documentary about it actually on Netflix. What's it called? The Surrounding Game. Very, very cool. Very interesting. And if you know Searching for Bobby Fischer, that movie is on Netflix streaming now too again. So they're also symmetrical. I didn't list that here because they're not all symmetrical. But symmetrical means that each player basically has the exact same kind of starting point. There's no difference between the white and the dark chess pieces. They have the same powers. They have the same setup. Everything's neutral. That's very symmetrical. This game is kind of an exception to that. And this is kind of, I've played this. It's a Viking game. I cannot pronounce it. It's got a lot of consonants in it. And it's asymmetrical. So you can see already that one player has less pieces than the other. And I haven't played in a long time, so I can't remember exactly how it goes. But I know that the pieces move differently too. And so it makes a very compelling kind of a different, I don't know, there's different roles you're playing. Even if you look at it from the starting point, these center figures, they're clearly probably defending, and these figures are probably attacking. That changes a lot of what you see here. These are very straightforward. Even cards, right? A deck of cards, you play a card game, everyone has the same set of cards. Within the cards, they may have, a wild card or something that makes it slightly powerful, but everyone has access to the exact same stuff. So those are kind of direct conflict or elimination games. You're trying to get rid of the other player's pieces. Okay, management or puzzle games. Bridge. I played bridge once. I was terrible at it. I liked learning it. I like learning Mahjong a little better, but I only played that once. But these are management type things. You're trying to work with what you have and try to make some educated guesses and plans on what you do next. Same with Clue. This is a great but simple game called Quirkle, and then Monopoly. So it's hidden information, which is interesting. You don't get to see what pieces your opponent may have. This is like visual Scrabble. In Monopoly, you may not know. You may hide your properties, cards, everything's hidden. This is hidden. These are all hidden. So hidden makes suspense because you're going to take your actions not knowing what other people might be doing or trying to do, which adds excitement and kind of, is this the right decision? You don't know until you do it. And so that can make it exciting to play. Mid or high level planning or decision making. Some are long, right? The long view. That's what chess and Risk and this is trying to think many steps ahead, right? I'm not a very good chess player. I do like to play. All these games are kind of thinking ahead to all the options and deciding which one is the best. These don't quite go that far, but there is kind of deductive reasoning for some of these. Race games, these all have dice or something that has a high randomness factor. There's simpler planning or decision making. So backgammon, you roll the dice, you move your pieces, and it's kind of a race around the board. Candyland, like I said, there's almost no decision making. You flip over the card, you move that many color squares. Sorry is the same thing, although it's driven by cards. And then like Cribbage, it's also a race. The high randomness in Cribbage or a card game is, you don't know what cards you're going to get. And then how do you make the most of what you get? But because you're not getting a whole hand, you're not dividing the whole deck of cards, you're only going to have like 6 cards. Here's some thoughts about what I think are good about those games. So these are familiar games. If you guys know any of those games, you can sit down and play them pretty easily. They're kind of understood. They've been around a good while. There's pretty clear expectations for the experience. You may know what you're getting into because they're familiar. They tend to have low learning curves, simple rules, limited movements, or you roll. What do you do on your turn? You move a piece a certain distance, or you roll dice and you move and you read where you land. Easy to learn, difficult to master. Chess, Go, and cards, I would argue, are good examples of that. When all information is visible, it's also a lower learning curve. Can we see what everyone has? It takes away some of the guesswork on whether something is a good idea or not. There's a satisfaction level. Symmetry, everyone's kind of the same, has the same thing to work with. You're not worrying about, does someone have the ability to do something that I can't? And that creates its own kind of tension. Clear decision making that may be simple or complex. Each turn, what do I do? In Monopoly, you roll the dice and you move. That's it. So what you do after you move you might have some decisions about, but it's pretty straightforward. And then again, satisfaction level, if there's hidden information, it does create suspense and uncertainty. When you're playing chess with somebody, they make a move that's odd. You don't know if they've made a mistake or you're in over your head and you don't know what's next for you. That can make it both delightful and daunting at the same time. What's limiting about these games? Randomness. Games with randomness, like Candyland, you're just flipping over a card. There's no playing. There's no decision. There's no strategy. You're just kind of doing stuff. It's kind of mechanical. I think that's probably why very small children really like Candyland, and their parents maybe less so. Randomness impacts the satisfaction of playing, and luck can make or break the game experience. Risk is a game where you're trying to move armies around the world and you attack other armies and things. And sometimes it just comes down to dice rolls. You could lose the game on a die roll, and that can be very unsatisfying to some people. So let's see, minimal decision points. Again, each turn is maybe exactly the same. Maybe the nature of each game is the same too. Is there only one way to win is another kind of thing. Everyone has the same exact goal. And this may be fine. Having played a lot of other types of games, these are things that have struck me as not being as interesting about these games. I'd play them again, but they're not as deep, compelling as some other mechanics. All information is visible. Like I said, it can be harder to discover game dynamics, which I'll talk about in a second. It can lack storytelling or immersive themes, and choices may be obvious or mathematical. That's the biggest thing with all information being visible. There's nothing to kind of wonder about or to create tension. Storytelling or immersive theme, that's again something that comes out of some of the other games I'm going to show you, where you could take chess and now you give it some special rules to certain pieces, or maybe one side or the other. Like the asymmetrical Viking chess game I gave you. Well, there's a story to be told there that says that, well, this group was surrounded and this group was surrounding them, and this group was equipped one way and this group was equipped a different way. And so there's a difference in who was kind of coming together to fight here. And let's see what happens. That's a different story being told than just chess, where everything kind of comes forward and they're identical. And then harder to discover game dynamics. By that, I mean some of the games I'm going to show you again, as you play, you start to realize what the potential of some of your options are. If I do this, that means that I'll then be able to do this. And if I do those two things, that lets me get this, and then this happens. So there's kind of almost like you're discovering the mechanics of the game as you play. If you are familiar with a chess, you will recognize that that does work that way. Chess, where you might be setting up the next 4 moves, and one is a revealed check and all this kind of thing, that's a part of discovery as you play a game, which is, again, is kind of exciting. You realize, oh, there's a lot more here than you anticipated, or the rules are easy to learn, but it's really interesting what subtleties or nuances are in the rules. It's very hard to design a game that way, by the way. So, in talking about other games beyond the ones we just spoke about, here's some concepts and potential. These are a few dynamics which can steer games toward more nuanced experiences, move beyond just rules toward discovering broader relationships and stories. This is what I'm most interested in for all of you and me personally with board games, is the idea of relationships and stories, and how can a board game help us either understand or explore the relationships between whatever's in this game, whatever the different dynamics are, and the story that can be told. There's a couple stories that are relevant to it, right? There's a story that the game may be trying to tell. Like I said, that Viking one, there's maybe the story that can be told from it. But then there's the story that comes from us experiencing and being in the game. The most compelling aspect to me about board games is that it's going to put us down around the table and it's going to have us follow certain rules, and we're going to have to think in a certain way. I played a lot of historical board games when I first started, war games when I first started playing games when I was a teenager. And what I most found interesting about it is that it's easy to look back on history and say, oh, they should have done this, or why didn't they see that? And if a game does a good job, it puts you in that driver's seat where you're actually not making decisions based on what we've learned over all this time. You're kind of getting to experience what somebody else maybe experienced. And it's all artificial, obviously, but when someone mentioned, can we do something that emulates the sensibility of being handicapped? Those are really interesting potentials I think that board games could have, because it limits what you can do, when right now you could theoretically maybe do almost anything. So it can help us be empathetic, or maybe understand different types of systems. I mean, and this can be cultural, it can be interpersonal, it could be political. It's easy to kind of look around the world as Americans sometimes, I think, and have people, be disparaging of other systems or peoples. Well, if we created a simulation of what those people are living in, and I'm going to show you an example of that. Some of my grad students did that. It may not be a game as something to win. It's more of a game as a simulation, and helping us understand how things work in a certain circumstance. Here's some aspects of that. Asymmetry. Each player has different abilities, rules, or goals. Collaborative gameplay, where players are a team trying to win cooperatively. That's something that was brand new. I've never played a game that worked like that before, and that's really interesting. Even to have have players play as teams. We're going to play, there's going to be 4 kind of pieces moving around the board, but for each board piece that's moving around the board, there's 2 players or 3, so that they get to kind of collaborate with each other and help decide what they should do next. Friction, like I talked about before, or multiple paths to victory. So these are different tactics or strategies that introduce different obstacles. Multiple paths to victory is very compelling. And then thematic content and teaching potential. So these are really interesting game themes which simulate or demonstrate experiences. So those are these kind of different concepts and potential in a game. These are the ones I'm kind of be talking about kind of moving forward. So an asymmetrical game, that's where each player has different roles or goals, and there's problem solving, and there's high replayability. So that means that each time you play, you could take a different role, which changes your decisions. And so the game has a little more longevity because your experience of it can change each time. So for example, this is a made up situation, but player 1 is a banker, player 2 is a manufacturer, player 3 is in charge of shipping and delivery, and player 4 is a retailer. So I don't know what this game is, but it's clear that each player is going to have different abilities and goals, but they also are impacted by how they interact with one another. Maybe this would be some game that all you're trying to do is teach some aspect of how economics work or supply and demand. And just by giving each person a different sort of role, you can kind of demonstrate it rather than just mathematically. So here's some examples of asymmetrical games. Citadels is a game where each player is trying to build a city. Each card represents a district in the city, and you're trying to build 8 districts. And you collect gold, and you pay gold to build each district, and you're trying to build 8. Once you build 8, the game's over. What's interesting about the game is every turn, each player gets a different role card. So the one role card that shows up here is Assassin, and there's, I don't know, 8 or 9 different role cards. So that means each turn, you may not get the role you want because they're passed around the table. That's compelling. It's like, okay, well, here's my goal. How can I use this character that I really didn't want at all? How is that going to help me get ahead or help slow down the other players? So rather than having a role throughout the whole game, it changes each turn. So that kind of requires some adjustment each time. Terraforming Mars, it's, each player is trying to do the most to turn Mars into a place where it could be habitated. So the game is over when the temperature has gone up to, I think, plus 8 degrees Celsius, when the oxygen level has reached 14%, and when all the 12 lakes have been actually placed on Mars. And then you're trying to grow forests and create cities, and it's a whole host of very believable kind of real-life science fiction blend of things. But the asymmetry in it is each player plays a different corporation from Earth who has different kind of advantages in their race to kind of colonize Mars. A lot of these games that I'm showing you, you don't know who wins till the end of the game because it's based on victory points. So during the game, you accumulate points for doing different things, and then you keep track. There's a tracker on the outside of the board here. And it's not a straight up, defeat the other player or kick them out or, tear down their stuff. You get points for doing different things. So this creates a lot of different paths to victory. These are also asymmetrical games, these 2 other ones too. Scythe is kind of an alternative 1920 steampunk sort of thing. I show it just because each player plays a different faction in this pseudo-European world, and they're all trying to compete for different resources so that they can build things and explore the land and then get the most points for harvesting a certain amount of stuff or having a certain size population. And you can get some points for combat, but there's not many, so it's not just a fighting game. Wildlife is very interesting because you all start as a primitive species on this kind of primordial landform. They all can have different advantages in different types of terrain, and your goal is to dominate your ecosystem. So you're trying to actually take over areas of land from other species. Sometimes you can eat other species. Sometimes you just push their species out. But that's, again, a different thing where the goals of each one is slightly different, or the abilities of each one is slightly different.